afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I would like to invite Professor Dan van der Horst from Edinburgh University to present his lecture with the theme City Regions as Energy Prosumers.
Yes. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm going to do something slightly differently because I've worked across different types of renewables. And I'm going to... Yeah, sure. Yeah. Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the invitation to speak at this conference. This course session is really interesting. I think in many ways wind has suffered in recent years in the public eyes, and especially when solar has started to overtake as a much more widely adopted technology. And I guess what I want to do is really put the challenge that we have with wind in the context of the wider challenge that we have with renewables more broadly. Because I think on the technological side, what you're doing is, most of you are working on is really important challenge, but some of the barriers that we have is not so much because the efficiency is not optimal or what have you, but rather because we have social and political processes that are working against the adoption and the more widespread use of wind energy. And I think it's maybe useful to try and zoom out a little bit and explore why that is. I've been doing work on public perception of renewables for the last 11, 12 years. I come from the UK, which, as you know, is a fairly windy island, but at some stage we were big exporters of papers on NIMBYism and resistance to wind farm, whilst at the European level we were still the big laggards in renewable energy. When I wrote some of my early papers on NIMBYism and wind, the UK was, I think, the only two countries who beat the UK at the bottom of the league in renewable energy was Malta, which used to be a British colony, and Luxembourg, which had a big industrial, I think, metal industry. I'm happy to say that this day and age, the UK has somehow leapfrogged the tables, at least with regards to offshore energy, offshore wind energy, but on onshore it's still a very, very problematic issue. And the current government, the Tories, have basically banned more or less the development of new onshore wind farms because the political basis, especially in the countryside of England and Wales, and their elderly voters say they don't want it. They don't want wind energy. They do want Brexit. So it's a very, very political mix that we're dealing with. And I'm sure some of you will recognise some of these versions of that story in your own country, and others will not recognise it because maybe their politics are slightly healthier than the ones that I'm living in on a daily basis. So, of course, some of the practical questions that we're facing with is, should we have more wind close to us? I can already tell you that I think the answer is a wholehearted yes. But in this talk, what I'll try to do is map out some of the challenges and issues as to why we should have them, and as to why we should maybe only focus on too much worried about things like efficiency, or even things like beautiful design, although I think that's very important, so I'll try to address these. So this is an article on the BBC from 2010, and it's an ongoing debate, but in reality in the UK we're building very few wind turbines in urban areas. We do build wind turbines close to homes in a few outlying areas in the UK, and I'll give you examples of those. Sorry. Keep going backwards. So we have a concrete problem, right? We want more renewable energy, a lot more. And that needs to be include wind energy because it's one of the things that we can do. But public protests are blocking many developments. Thus, politicians can be reluctant to support it. So for the developers, the public protests have meant more work, delays, frustration, financial loss. For the government, it has meant that we're late in achieving our targets, and our targets remain often fairly low in comparison. So, how can we solve it? Unfortunately, I don't have a concrete answer to you now. Otherwise, I might want to run for office and implement it. but I think it's useful to try and set it in the wider setting. So at the UN level, we have the Kyoto targets, as you know. In 80 years from now, we're trying to achieve, to minimize the crime that we're inflicting on future generations. So if you think about it, we are the first generation in human history where everybody who's gone to secondary school knows about the damage that we're doing to future generations. So we're in a very unique situation in human history here. And if you think about climate policy, it is in many ways the most ethical policy that we've ever implemented. It's a policy that concerns the unborn children of people we've never met before. So if you think about how incredibly, philosophically complex and challenging that the idea is, then you also realize we're, pardon my English, absolutely shit at achieving it, right? Because we have to achieve tremendous change in our energy system, and so far we've done peanuts. And I can see wind turbines from my hotel room here. It doesn't amount to very much at the moment in comparison to the overall change we have to achieve in our energy system. So on the one hand, it's a very ethical policy. On the other hand, we've been struggling to get off the starting blocks, if you like. So the problems we're facing now are still at the very beginning, when we still don't have so many wind turbines and we don't have so many solar panels, etc. So we have no time to lose, right? Because early change, early implementation, early emissions reductions count a lot more than the ones that come much later. So we need to learn lessons as we go along. And to give governments their credit, that's exactly what's happening. We have policies that are being implemented, mistakes are being made, and of course what we hope is that we can learn from these mistakes and become better as we go along. So my purpose is not to blame governments for being stupid. As you all know, to call someone stupid is descriptive. We need to be analytical. We're beyond that. Most of us can do stupid stuff and are stupid about many things. It's the things that we devote all our attention to that we try to become smarter about. So the focus is very much on the lessons that we've learned. So you can actually see all these energy policies as experiments. And occasionally they've been very successful. You can think of the offshore wind development in the UK as being successful. You can think of the Danish wind energy story as being quite successful. But in many occasions there have been sort of big problems, big failures. And that's, of course, you learn more from failing than you learn from being successful. Even it's more frustrating. So, okay, lessons on technology, market and state. This is just a snapshot. I'm sure some of you will have others to add. So I think we agree since the 19th century that more energy efficient technologies by themselves is not enough to achieve reduction of overall energy use. That's been proven with the coal industry in the 19th century. We need a combination of efficiency improvements with reduction, curtailment of consumption. So consumption is the big elephant in the room. We got technology learning curves. You look at some papers that are 20 years old and they have no bearing with the current situation for some technologies, and with others it's been maybe overly optimistic. So what we've seen is that actually there's been a consistent funding mechanism from a specific state, and we've seen actually very, very rapid changes in these curves. So that's been really interesting and I guess uplifting as well. We can see that globalization is good for technology cost curves. Think about what happened with PV. So one of the reasons why quite a few European countries had PV programs that were then oversubscribed and they basically gave money away for free and was ridiculous subsidization. But what happened? Nobody predicted that the Chinese would get this cost breakthrough. Nobody predicted, not enough people predicted, actually some people predicted, but not enough people were paying attention to the financial crash that was coming. All of a sudden, interest rates were zero in the bank. If you can get 5–6% interest on a solar panel, that was the best thing you could possibly have. So it was external circumstances that created some of the oversubscription as well. And I know there's variation between different European countries, but you can pick up half a dozen countries where you can say from an economic efficiency point of view that policy was wasting money. In reality, of course, it led to breakthrough and acceptance and adoption of solar panels at an incredible speed that nobody predicted. It also led to the breakup of PV industries in the West, of course, who couldn't compete with the Chinese. Okay, so we also know globalization is bad for creating and ensuring no benefits. Again, you think of the early days of wind turbine manufacturing, fairly smaller scale. It was stuff that you could do at the community level in terms of installing and owning. And these days, you know, larger scale, obviously far more efficient in producing energy, but much larger factories are required. So you can't really have a factory in every country that's got wind turbines being set up. So we do also see that the state is essential for setting targets, but I think there's also something to be arguing that the state is a bit weaker than it was, and this again is something of the neoliberalization agenda, and that's, if you like, you know, the change in the broader socio-economic and political landscape that we're seeing. Transition to a low-carbon society is something that requires longer-term planning, and you know, environmental problems are market failure, and it's difficult to design a market that addresses market failure. So this is, of course, an important political tension that we continue to see. The lessons we've learned about publics, I use the word publics, that betrays me as a social scientist, because really there isn't such a thing as a single public and a single mindset. You know, maybe a North Korean dictator would like to think that there is, and if you live in that regime, then you will make sure that you will only have one opinion. But in reality, we have sections of society thinking in different ways, as I'm sure you're all familiar with from daily life. So we see generally that there continues to be a very broad support for renewable energy in principle. Low carbon, clean energy is seen as a good thing. The whole idea that the environment is important is now embraced by everyone virtually, and that's a change, of course, from 2 generations ago. You know, we teach this in school. Nobody says they don't care about the environment. Concerns about opposition to locally proposed developments actually we continue to see that. The moment it goes from the abstract, in principle, clean energy is good, to in concrete, somebody's proposed to build something down my street. That's a totally different question, basically, and the answer is totally different. A lot of concerns are being raised. We do see, if the project goes ahead, and in any case, that there's like a rebound effect on the opinion. People, after a wind farm has been active for a couple of years, people were actually quite happy with it, or don't resist it so much. So there's, in that sense, you could almost encourage the government to say, well, there's no public opinion, we'll stick it in anyway. They'll come round to it. Offering local benefits, a number of countries have put that into legislation. If you do it too late, it's seen as a bribe, so it actually backfires. We also see the situation that protesters are becoming more professional than developers, and this is because a lot of protesters are retired people who had professional jobs. They know how the legal system works and how the planning system works. They got time on their hand, they got passion. And they got social media networks that helps them to exchange information with other protesters around the world. And of course the company's got a bunch of very competent engineers, but maybe they haven't hired a sociologist. Or maybe what often also happens is that the planning system is such that you have to buy the plot first, or you have to plan it in one location and then defend it. So this is called the decide, announce, defend model. So that puts you in a very vulnerable position. You can't start with an open discussion. You start with a project proposal that then sort of already pushes some people to be concerned. And we see also that the governments, of course, are not very effective with dealing with it. Sometimes trying to curtail the rise of protest. Sometimes seeing political changes and losing the political will to push through. So this is my important caveat. Everything we've seen so far with renewables is only about the small bits that we've built so far. So we've delivered peanuts, kilowatt hours, and we've seen lots of problems with the peanuts. So I'm not predicting what it will be like in 20, 30 years' time if we manage to really ramp up production of renewables. But I do propose a certain reset of the proposal. I propose that we reconsider the basics. And really that is essential in remembering that climate change policy is an ethical policy. There's an ethical reason why we're doing this. We can go through the other issues. We can think about, is it good for fuels, for sort of energy security? Some countries say this. in reality, if you rely on coal that's freely traded in the world market, you have your energy security. If you make friends with your neighbors, you have your energy security. So it's not a very, going for renewables, it's not necessarily a single, a traditional way to do energy security. Margaret Thatcher in the UK closed down the mines as a form of energy security. She rather relied on the global markets than on local miners who were voting for another party. So it's important to recognize the reason why we're putting subsidies in renewables is because we don't have the political courage to carbon tax the dirty fuels. But the reason why we have a policy on renewables is mainly predominantly the solid rationale is climate change in future generations. So it's a strong ethical drive. We shouldn't count on a miraculous technological fix. We should continue to work on that, but we need to work on that in collaboration with other approaches, including the ones I'm mentioning here. Social impact and change always happens. Technology always changes people. Think about your mobile phone. It changes the way in which we function beyond recognition. Nobody really predicted this. It's very difficult for us to go back. We all got addicted to them. So when you have technological change, you have social change. And some of it you can a little bit steer maybe, but most of it sort of happens as you go along. But maybe we should actually then do technological change in such a way that we hope to encourage some social change. And of course, one form of social change that we also need in the pack is energy efficiency and reduced energy consumption. So if we build more wind turbines, build more wind farms, are there any ways in which we can combine that with making people think about consumption? So we go from the UN global agreement, we go to national targets. There's absolutely no reason why we can't go down to regional targets, of course, because we have our regional resource assessments. So that would be a logical step down to bring them all to the local. We have a global moral duty. It's coming into you and your region, more closely by. At the regional scale, democracies tend to function a little bit better in theory. It's more recognized and understood by people. It's closer to home. Generally, you see that the smaller democracies function overall less badly than the large democracies, I think. And that's literally because you take things down from the more ideological, and the power base is less far away, and it's more about sort of local hard issues, if you like. So region is a key. If you could see regions as a key driver for socio-technical climate action, then that would actually be a very important starting point. Okay, and I think the last one, this is some work that's been done on Sweden, which has some of the strongest form of local authority power. And basically it's much more common there, it has been much more common in the past at least. I'm not an expert on modern Swedish politics, but to actually commission stuff at the national level and let local regional authorities bid for it. So you say, I want so much 5% in 5 years' time, 10% more of our electricity to come from wind farms. This is the financial packet we make available at the national level. You get regions to bid for it. They've done that for nuclear in the past in Sweden. So entirely different from the approach we have in most countries, where it's mainly driven by the private sector initiatives. So again, I said most of this already, but just quickly to reiterate why we should go more local. Well, of course, as an analog, we can think of food. Being in Italy and talk about slow food movement. You can say it started here, you can say it never left here. But the same logic applies for a lot of the resources that we're using. So it's a scale that people can relate to. It's not just that the information is more and more at hand. This is both through the local media, as through workplaces you move to, where you commute to work, the colleagues that you meet, your friends and your family. There's also a sense of belonging. Regional local politics are less abstract. You can get people who totally disagree with each other on ideological things, but if a particular factory over there can be connected to an old folks home over there to use a spare waste heat, there's no ideology there. That's so that everybody would be happy to support that. And then we see that cities are innovating much more climate action than countries do. There's a lot of local innovation, and of course, purely from a evolutionary point of view, if you have more actors, it's it's more likely that somebody will come up with a new smart ideas. So more, you know, in that sense, region and city level approaches are really important, and they can inspire national governments subsequently. We also see there's opportunities to do things that are unique, locally unique, to develop and support local identity. And we have opportunities for more holistic and cross-sectoral approaches, not just wind, not just solar, but linking transport, linking with storage, linking with consumption. I just wanted to, I've talked at you, it's late in the afternoon, we're in a bit of a bunker situation, so I thought I'd show you some pictures to complement my text. So as you can see, we've been very engaging with the wind in the past. You know, you see here the wind vane that we see on all buildings. I'm not entirely sure how much people looked at it on a daily basis. I presume that kind of public information was provided for a reason. So it's part of our cultural heritage in Europe. So just see if I can get, oh, I can add a pointer. Of course, this is Legoland, this is Denmark, so they're actually selling toys that reflect their big industrial revolution in wind turbines. We see sort of daily life, day-to-day cheap kind of ornaments in gardens. We see people going OTT over the top here with sort of super concentration of ornamental wind devices. And I just put this, I don't know if you can see this, this is, what do you call it, the wind chime that makes noise in the garden. We actually like noise from the wind, certain kinds of noises. So noise is not always a bad thing. I came across this, is a Tibetan prayer roll, which you roll by hand, you can roll by wind, somebody pulled off. We get more of those in the UK, where churches can't afford to maintain themselves, not enough people going there and making donations, lots of roof space. Is this you know, a shame on cultural heritage? Is it damaging it, or is it sustaining a community? We could discuss it, but we have religion intersecting now with energy. This is on Orkney, where I was last week. This wind turbine is maybe 20 meters from the church, and it's providing electricity for the ground source, for the air source heat pump. So it's direct local electricity use, because Orkney, although it's on the national grid, it's constrained. They can't pump all the wind energy that they're generating. They can't get it all down to down south. We have, I'm sorry I overlapped these. Accidentally, I forgot to flip them, but we have, of course, wind in our landscapes. This is Schiedam, quite close to where I grew up. So we have had urban wind turbines that have become part of our heritage. But I just wanted to remind you, some of you recognize this is a street in an Italian city, and you've been using wind in our vernacular architecture in our daily lives for centuries. We've lived with wind and sun and adjusted our behavior accordingly. Would your grandmother wash on a day that it was rainy and she couldn't hang it out to dry? Or your grandfather, don't be sexist here? No, you would work with it. Would it have been possible, a challenge you organise here, to swap around and go on a trip today and have the conference tomorrow? Because tomorrow it's going to rain and today it's sunny and beautiful. It's the idea that we actually change with the season and change with nature and live with the wind a little bit more than we've done. We've gone to expect a 24/7 economy, you know, 24/7 services, all perfectly aligned. And actually, one of the things that nature does with this variation is not necessarily a bad thing. We want storage. We don't want to be, you know, stuck in this building for a week because it rains. But we also, there's scope for us to not only just hang on to that 24/7 guarantee, but also live a bit more with the seasons, with the weather. There's very strong evidence from psychology and sociology literature that that's actually really good for our well-being. It's better for our mental health, it's better for our physical health. It may not necessarily increase our GDP, but as we know, that's a very poor proxy for happiness that we're pursuing. So it's important for us to rethink these things. We've been engaging with the wind in the past, in foregone centuries. It's been very part of our histories, both our cultural histories and economic histories in Europe, because we went out and did bad but very profitable things in other parts of the world. We've, does anyone know Lowry? This is an industrial painter of industrial towns. He sells incredibly well in China. Why? Not because it's a typical flavour that the Chinese necessarily would agree with. It's something they recognise. It's the one European painter that most modern Chinese can relate to, because this is what China, lots of China looks like, has looked like in last 20 or 30 years. And you can see the homes here in between the smoking stacks. And the point what I'm trying to make here, of course, this is what, and this is in my paper if you want to read it, the idea of prosumption. So in the 19th century we were living, consuming and producing right next door to one another. It led to very bad air pollution and poor living standards, etc. And now the reason why our cities are much cleaner is because our factories are in China. So we got to reconnect that. One of the reasons why we're not aware of where electricity comes from is because it's been designed by really clever engineers to come out of a light switch. Same with your toilet, same with your telephone. It's just technology that works there. It's there when you need it. You pay some monthly fee that you can't really relate to, and it's specially designed to be convenient. But if we want to live more, to consume less and make sure we make the most of renewable energy, then we've got to reconnect with the source of supply. We've got to reconnect again with the fact that it's a windy day, maybe electricity will be cheaper then. And we have parts of the grid, extremities of the grid where we see that that's starting to happen. I think certainly in parts of Scotland we already have wind farms being switched off on windy days because they can't sell the electricity enough of the electricity. That could be maybe locally used in a better way. And it's not just a matter of batteries as part of the solution, but maybe also alignment of certain industrial process, maybe a cheap washing day because it's windy. So we have to find out reconnect again. This is painted by Monet. You might recognise it. So it's the House of House of Parliament in Westminster. And I had a colleague of mine in Birmingham when I was there in the previous job. He was able to deduce from that the kind of the level of particulates and the level of industrial pollution at the time when the guy painted it. So we have some historic evidence and historic track record of pollution in the past. And of course, it's been almost a miracle the way in which our cities and our society is cleaned up environmentally. But that's with relationship to particulates and not CO2 emissions. So we make great progress in that sense, but there's a lot more to do in the 21st century with CO2. And I think, again, a diversity of pictures from across Europe. So this is Spain. You see a super concentration of wind, traditional wind turbines. So we've had plenty of examples of that. Those were we stuck in as many as we could for good reasons. I think these are mainly for wheat. The Dutch windmills, I'm sure you're familiar with pictures, but these ones actually not for water, they're for timber. So this is a big industrial estate basically on the outskirts of Amsterdam. This is Marsala, and I think the wind turbines here are used for pump up water to seawater, for salt making. And this is Crete, where basically super concentration of small wind turbines to pump up water. So this has been part of our proto-industrial landscape for a long time, and there's no reason why we can't in the 21st century have again these kind of super concentrations. Although they'll obviously very much change their physical and visual outlook of the landscape. And it challenges also to think when we want to develop new technologies and want to have more of them, we need to make not only these technologies visible in a more attractive way, we need to make visible what they're replacing. And I think that's really, what, as a developer, that's not what you should be doing, but as a region, that is something what you could be doing as a country, or as an artist, or as an engineer working with an artist. There's ways to make these connections in a very creative way. So these examples of making emissions more visible. Of course, the funny thing is when we see a chimney and stuff coming out of it this day and age, almost certainly it will be water vapor, right? because actually we got scrubbers and we got filters and everything. So this stuff is not CO2, and we had this needed this Photoshop thing to make it, to communicate the idea of CO2. And we got artists here using soot that they capture and painting with it. We got people using pigeons to map out how air pollution travels through the city. So the reason why China is doing a lot on climate is because they've got to do so much on local air pollution, because it's such a huge problem in their country. And we again got to make sure that we connect these things. You know, many European cities are overshooting the European directive for clean air. We got to use that also as an argument to have more wind power and to have more other renewables. This is so we had this artist picture in the previous slide, and this is a Chinese company actually selling all sorts of clean technologies, and they've gone a step up from this idea. And what's nice about this is that these are pictures of real children, so they basically press all the emotional buttons with the local public, and of course you see this huge, it's like visual pollution, there's all these chimneys, and very effective ways to really get the message across. So Xi is just Xi Jinping has just become the president for life in China, and clean air, addressing pollution is one of his top 3 priorities. So and obviously China is, for want of a better word, they are leaders in the world with regards to clean energy. And not because of CO2 per se, but because of more imminent problems. So we've got to find ways to work together on things that we recognize as immediate problems, whilst also working on the longer term solution. There's some combinations of other visualization tools. This is a GIS with sort of the roads being visible. I think this is NOx emissions in a part of London. This is superimposing a block of CO2 emissions from a particular boiler in a particular building in Lower Manhattan, I believe. So you can use scientific approaches for that as well as artistic expressions. And I think they're powerful and important ways to visualize it. Here another one I don't think I need to tell you. It's just a thermal image, of course, but it's visually very, very sounding, it's very effective, and there's humans in there. And again, that is part of the reason why we need wind, because we also need more electricity so we can get rid of fossil fuel vehicles. And we need more scientists, by the way, as well. And then in summary, to finish off with, so there's no way we can fix everything through technology alone. That is a very naive expectation. It would be lovely if we could. We're still waiting for fusion to come along. It's only 50 years away. I think it's been like that for the last 50 years. So we can't. Technology alone is not going to resolve it. Aesthetics is not a fixed thing, it's a politically motivated thing, so we can't just have pretty turbines and not going to resolve it. It doesn't mean to say that it wouldn't be great if we had more diversity in design, and I personally think some turbines are prettier than others, and you probably agree with me, but we pick different ones. But there is work for everyone to do, but you can't expect the other side of a particular academic mix to fix it. The ethics are hidden in the implementation, really. They're all a lot of the reasons why people don't like these local developments, because they feel it's been pressured upon them, because they feel the company is saying, oh, we agree, but in reality they're there to make lots of money and there's no local benefits. So there's a lot of, it's because the implementation is driven by a private sector approach that doesn't make it visible that this is ethical. So we need to combine the sense of ecological duty with local regional ownership and participation, more holistic approaches, and this whole idea of living with nature, part of the bigger picture of what it means to live well in the 21st century. And it does connect with these wider issues of where we're going with society. It connects to wider issues like demographic change, the fact that for example, affordable wages for industrial workers and automation, all these things sort of link up with it. And we can think the way in which we design wind farms, for example, has managed to change the countryside in terms of access. It's visually different, but can you make mountain bike routes there? Can you provide new touristic facilities through it. I've seen various studies about the negative impacts, the perceived negative impacts of wind energy, and there were lots of claims like, oh, it's bad, the tourism, I don't mind so much, but the tourists don't like it. That's a typical claim that you would use if you can't find a good reason to not like it, and then you blame someone else who might not like it and therefore impact on you. I've seen the 3 studies I've seen on the impact on tourism, all 3 of them say there's absolutely no evidence that you're going to lose, that you have fewer tourists visiting the place. So some people stay away because they hate wind farms, but other people come who love it, and overall the balance is the same. In fact, tourists who come to a place don't have a prior expectation of the landscape, so they'll be less affected by changes to the landscape. And the real problem we're facing with is that we're looking at long-term change in climate, which motivates us to do something on cleaner energy, but the moment you change something in the local landscape, that's instantaneously recognizable. So again, we have the multiple invisibilities, if you like, of the rationale of having renewable energy. But if we can use that as a way of opening the landscape, if we use it as a way of making it more accessible to new forms of healthy recreation or new forms of engagement with nature, I think that's a win-win situation. Wind farms are moving part of nature. We're living in the 21st century. We should move away from the idea of nature and technology being totally separated. We are climate engineers, and we're not the only ones. The termites are climate engineers. The great armadillo is a climate engineer, digs holes that 40 other species live in. That's ecology. But they're smart climate engineers. We're dumb climate engineers because we're making a climate that is worse for our children. So we need to become smarter climate and ecological engineers in that sense. We can switch off wind turbines when we know that a certain type of bird is flying by that's quite rare, that's going to lose its 1% of our annual wind production, and it might save a species that's on the brink of extinction. We have all the information about where birds fly, thanks to all the investment we've made in wind. So we can try to be far more creative in that sense and find ways to live with nature through this technology, which is ultimately a natural technology that goes with, literally with the winds and the seasons. So I'd like to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. Do we have any questions?
Or comments?
You did touch upon it at the end, where you talked about electric cars, and there's a lot more politics willing to go in that direction, and that will also increase the demand for electricity. How do you feel about that, and how have you seen a move in that direction?
My understanding of the technology is quite friendly that electric cars are our only shorter-term option. So that's the only way to decarbonize, potentially decarbonize the transport. The transport is the only growing sector of energy use in Europe, right? So I think it's a good thing. And of course, the moment, there's some early papers on energy prosumers that shows that people who have PV panels on the rooftop become more conscientious energy consumers as well. They try to live with the electricity is produced from the PV panel. So similarly, there's a reason to expect that the moment people got a big battery and a PV, that they will start also to more balance their ideas. And of course now we're in some countries we have markets for, what do you call it, for backup generation. So if you know that day, if you're going to hitch a ride with your neighbor, that your battery is going to generate more money for you, or maybe you give that money to a charity, which motivates some people more than a couple of euros for yourself. So it actually gives you an additional motive, and it's almost a form of gamification, if you like, that we see. We also see it with our Fitbits and our, in our sort of health technology. So I think it's a good thing, definitely.
But do you see a political driving towards that direction more than in terms of producing energy from wind?
So I think the politics are different for different countries. Norway is leading Europe with electric cars. You wouldn't expect that necessarily for a country that's got more roads per inhabitant than any other European country, I think. Germany, more difficult with all the big cars, so they were more reluctant to get into it. The scandal, of course, did put a lot of effort, pressure on them. So I think in principle that is definitely a good thing, because it includes the storage element and it includes that engagement, and it's again part of your energy education and your energy literacy that you gain by being more proactively busy. Our grandparents, again, they were familiar with. They weren't assuming that the heating was going to be on 24/7, because they had to collect the wood and they had to store it. So they were making proactive choices there. And I think having a battery in your car might stimulate you again to make certain proactive choices. I hope.
Do you think that making wind turbines more visible will make people used to them and less resistance to them? Is that your last note there? More visible and important?
Yes, so this idea of invisibility, literal invisibility, from the point of view of the eyes, solves the problem, is falsifyingly wrong. It's very clear that the public resistance is at its highest when the project doesn't exist yet, but is being planned. So it's not the visibility of actual wind turbines that causes people to get a fit or to get really angry. It's the thought that something's going to be developed in a green field near to them by some big money-grabbing company. So this direct visibility is not a good predictor at all of whether people like it. People don't like to see wind turbines that are not turning. It's a very different. You can design them in such a way that they turn in a really interesting, sort of performative way. And it's good to see. It's good for us to know where the energy comes from, because we've deliberately hidden it in the past, which allowed us to think that we're living clean, green lives in our nice European cities when we were polluting the planet in other areas.
So, one question. How do you answer when people say, what about nuclear power, which is also clean and can provide giant amount of energy?
Maybe clean, but it's not sustainable.
But that's public perception that it's clean. There's no CO2.
Okay, so that's an excellent question. I'll give you this is my personal opinion, and we're all entitled to our own, of course, in any case. If you like nuclear, it's a very good reason to say I don't like wind, because €1 you spend on nuclear subsidies, you cannot spend on wind subsidies. Logical. The point I'm making about the ethics is this about intergenerational equity. And unfortunately, that's the one thing that nuclear also falls flat on intergenerational equity. We're leaving future generations with nuclear waste. So that's my direct comparison. And the other thing, this is again political, the history of nuclear energy, very secretive. It's a byproduct of making bombs. It's the best way to guarantee jobs for your children and your grandchildren who don't get cancer, because it takes long to decommission a plant. We've never fully decommissioned plants. And they're always 20 years, double the time, double the budget. And this is evidence. So I don't think it's a good way of spending our money. But I'm not wasting my time arguing with somebody who likes nuclear. I think that it's more important that we tackle the consumption issue and enable people to live a happier life whilst consuming less energy, rather than being stuck in traffic and having road rage, or flying somewhere and being more frustrated adrenalized when they arrive. Because it's very evident that again that we're getting all the cheap energy use that's not giving us a lot of joy. So we've reached, I think, sort of peak consumption in that sense.
Thank you very much.